Sagittarius, the midnight visitor who came to awaken what you thought you'd lost? The door that opened while you slept. Sagittarius, there are certain nights when the air feels different. As if the whole world is holding its breath just for you. You wake, not from a dream but from a shift you can't explain. The stillness is alive, the darkness is gentle, and something unseen is standing at the edge of your awareness. This isn't fear. This is recognition. A presence has entered, not into your home, but into the hidden chamber of your soul. It doesn't speak in words, but you understand it completely. It carries a memory you forgot you had. A promise you once made to yourself before the noise of life pulled you away. This visitor is not here to take. They are here to awaken. To light a candle in a room you stopped visiting long ago. To remind you that your spirit has never been lost, only waiting for the right moment to rise again. And as you lie there between waking and dreaming, you realize you have been found by something you didn't know you were missing. I'm Sophia, and this is Zodiac Wisdom, where we explore the hidden chapters of your story through the lens of astrology and the language of the soul. If this message stirs something in you, stay until the end. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the whispers meant for you. Gate 1. They didn't come to invade, they came to awaken. Sagittarius, you've spent so much of your life holding space for others that you sometimes forget what it feels like to have someone hold space for you. You've been the steady fire on a cold night, the safe harbor when storms rolled in, the listener when no one else had the patience to stay. Outwardly, it looks like resilience. But resilience has its cost, and for you, that cost has been silent depletion. You've given away more pieces of yourself than you realized, each time telling yourself it was just one more time, until the rhythm of giving became the only song you knew how to play. That night, the one that still lingers in your memory like the echo of a dream, didn't arrive with drama. There was no knock on the door, no sudden rush of fear. Instead, there was a subtle shift, so gentle that if you had been distracted, you might have missed it. But something inside you stilled. Your breath slowed, your senses sharpened, and a quiet awareness spread through you, as though the air itself was holding its breath. This was not the kind of stillness that precedes danger. It was the stillness that precedes recognition. Your soul knew before your mind did. You were not alone. And yet, this was no intrusion. This was not the cold hand of fear reaching for you in the dark. No, it was the warm brush of familiarity, like the faint scent of a flower from your childhood, or the echo of a laugh you had once loved. It was a homecoming. Someone or something had entered not through the locked front gates of your daily life, but through a quieter passage, a door you had forgotten you left ajar. A side door in the house of your spirit, one that only certain souls could ever find. Maybe it was an ancestor, stepping across the invisible threshold between realms because they heard the unspoken weight in your heart. Maybe it was an old version of yourself, the one you had abandoned when life demanded you become stronger. Maybe it was a soul you once loved in this lifetime or another, returning because a part of you had called them long ago. You see, these kinds of visits are never random. Souls don't wander into our deepest chambers by accident. They are called, not by your conscious voice, but by the quiet pulse of your spirit when it knows it is time to awaken. The truth is, Sagittarius, you had been calling for them without realizing it. Every night you fell asleep with that aching fatigue, the kind that isn't just in the body but in the soul. You sent out a signal. Every time you bit back your truth so you could hold the peace for someone else, your spirit whispered into the ether, "Don't let me disappear. Don't let my fire go out." And on that night, the call was answered. They didn't knock because the invitation had already been written in the language of your own longing. It's easy to misunderstand these visitations. The human mind is quick to question. Was it just a dream? Was I imagining it? Was it something to fear? But the body knows the difference between fear and recognition. Fear makes your heart race. Recognition makes it pause as if listening. This was your soul listening, and hearing something it had been waiting for. This midnight visitor didn't come with explanations. They didn't unravel every thread of your confusion or erase every ache in your heart. That wasn't the point. They came to remind you of something more important. That you are not as alone as you've convinced yourself to be. That your exhaustion, while real, is not the whole story. That the fire you've used to keep others warm was never meant to burn out quietly in the corner. For so long you've worn your strength like armor, and that armor has been both your protection and your prison. You've been praised for being the strong one, the one who can handle anything, the one who never falls apart. But what they don't see is that behind that title lies a deep yearning, to be seen without the mask, to be received without having to earn your place. That night, the visitor stepped through the threshold not to challenge your strength, but to give you permission to set it down. Imagine a weary traveler finally arriving at a long-forgotten inn, the kind with a fire already burning in the hearth, a bed already warmed, and a soft voice saying, "Rest. You've done enough for now." That was what this visitor brought. Not a demand, not a warning, but a homecoming for the parts of you that had been left standing in the cold. You might ask, why now? Why this moment after all these years? Because Sagittarius, your soul had reached a turning point. You had spent enough time pouring yourself into the needs of others, holding up worlds that were never yours to hold. And though you didn't admit it out loud, something inside you knew it couldn't go on forever. Your body had begun to send the signals, the headaches that lingered, the heaviness in your chest, the dreams that had started to fade into the background of your life. The visitor came not to fix you, but to place a hand on your shoulder and say, "You don't have to do this alone anymore." They were here to awaken the memory of who you are when you are not performing strength, to remind you of the days when your laughter was unguarded, when your joy didn't require explanation, when you didn't measure your worth by how much you could endure. The visitor was not here to take anything from you. They were here to give you back to yourself. So, you sat there, maybe not physically but in the stillness of your spirit, and you listened. Not to words but to a presence. A warmth that asked for nothing except your willingness to remember. And in that moment something shifted. You didn't know it yet, but a seed had been planted, a slow-blooming truth. You were never burning out. You were being called back to your own flame. This was not the beginning of fear, Sagittarius. This was the beginning of remembrance. And that night, the door stayed open just long enough for you to feel it, the quiet, unshakable truth that the visitor didn't come to invade. They came to awaken. Gate 2, clearing what isn't yours. Sagittarius, your soul is not a blank space. It is a home. And like any home, it has doors and windows, rooms that hold warmth, and corners that gather dust. Over the years, many have entered your sacred space. Some arrived with love in their hands, leaving gifts of comfort and trust. Others entered carrying something heavier, pain disguised as care, control masked as concern. And because of your open-hearted nature, you let them in. You didn't just welcome them. You rearranged your furniture to make them feel at home. You took their stories as if they were your own, held their burdens as if carrying them was proof of your love. But here's the truth you rarely admit, even to yourself. Not all of what you carry belongs to you. Those whispers that tell you you're not enough, that hesitation in your gut before you speak your truth, that reflex to soften your needs so someone else won't feel small. Those are fingerprints left behind by visitors who never cleaned up after themselves. You didn't notice it at first because these imprints blend so well into the fabric of your life. They become the voices in your head, the weight in your chest, the exhaustion that lingers even when you've done nothing all day. This is where the midnight visitor's presence becomes impossible to ignore. They didn't come to simply warm their hands by your fire. They came to point out the clutter in the corners you've stopped seeing. To walk with you room by room, through the corridors of your soul and say, This was never yours to keep. It's a strange kind of grief, realizing that some of the thoughts and fears you've been wrestling with for years aren't even your own. It's like finding someone else's photograph in your favorite book. An image from a story you were never a part of, yet somehow you've been carrying it around like proof of your own life. The visitor is gentle but firm. They don't demand you throw everything out at once. They simply hold up the objects of your inner world to the light, so you can see them clearly. The criticism that made you second-guess every choice. The inherited fears from a parent who meant well but lived small. The guilt you took on because someone else didn't want to face their own mistakes. These things are not you. They never were. And the longer you hold them, the less room there is for what is truly yours to flourish. You start to see the symptoms for what they are. That persistent tension in your shoulders, not random. It's the body's way of holding the weight of words you never said. The shallow breathing when you're around certain people. Not a flaw, but your intuition trying to shrink away from an energy that doesn't match yours. The dreams you've been postponing for years, not because you lack ambition, but because somewhere along the way you absorbed the belief that wanting more was selfish. the visitor reminds you you can put these things down. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You don't need to carry someone else's wounds to prove your compassion. You don't need to wear someone else's armor to prove your loyalty. Compassion without boundaries isn't love. It's slow erosion. And Sagittarius, you were never meant to erode. Of course, the act of clearing is rarely comfortable. When you start removing what doesn't belong to you, some will resist. People who benefited from your self-doubt might feel unsettled. Those who were used to leaning on you without giving back might call you distant, selfish, or changed. And yes, you will have moments where you wonder if they're right. This is the fragile stage of clearing, the point where you must remind yourself again and again that release is not rejection. You are not abandoning anyone by releasing what was never yours to carry. You are simply returning it to its rightful place. In this process, the visitor becomes both guide and mirror. They show you the truth, but they also reflect back the parts of you that were never lost. The part that can set something down without guilt. The part that knows that space is not emptiness but possibility. You begin to see your soul's home differently. Without the clutter, the rooms feel larger. The air moves freely. Light reaches corners that have been dim for years. You realize you've been walking around hunched over not because you were weak but because you were weighed down by baggage you didn't even pack. There is a quiet kind of liberation in this stage. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It comes in small, almost unnoticeable moments. The way your chest feels lighter when you wake, the way you no longer rehearse every conversation in your head before speaking, the way you find yourself smiling. Not because of something extraordinary, but because for once you're not carrying the heaviness of 10 other people in your heart. And maybe the most powerful shift of all is this. You stop needing to explain your release to anyone. You no longer try to convince people that letting go was the right thing to do. You understand that some will never see the invisible weight you've put down, and that's okay. This is not for them. This is for you. By the time the visitor leads you back to the threshold of your soul's home, you realize they haven't added anything to you. They've taken nothing tangible away. All they've done is help you see, and seeing is enough. Because once you see what isn't yours, you can never unknow it. And once you begin to clear, you make room for what has been waiting for you all along. This is the gift of the midnight visitor. They didn't come to fix you. They came to help you release what was never yours to hold, so you could finally feel what it's like to stand in a home that belongs entirely to you. Gate 3. The soul you once were returns. Sagittarius, there is a moment in deep healing when you expect to find something entirely new. And instead, you meet someone you've known your whole life. First, you don't recognize them. They stand in the quiet space you've just cleared, smiling like they've been waiting forever. And then it hits you. They have your eyes, your fire, your unfiltered laughter. They are you. Not the you that learned to bend so you wouldn't break. Not the you that carried everyone else's stories until your own voice went silent. This is the soul you once were, the one that lived before the world taught you to shrink. You remember flashes, running toward life without hesitation, saying yes to the things that made your heart race, loving with a wildness that wasn't careless but pure. This was the you who believed in magic before you knew the word impossible. The you who trusted people before you learned the skill of scanning for danger in every smile. The you who didn't apologize for taking up space, because you didn't yet know the weight of shame. Somewhere along the line, life convinced you to close the door on that version, to pack them away with the dreams that felt too fragile to survive reality. But here they are, returned to you, walking barefoot across the floors of your soul as if they never left. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they've been here all along, hiding in the rooms you stopped visiting, waiting for the day you were ready to invite them back into the center of your life. The midnight visitor didn't bring them to you. They simply unlocked the door you'd forgotten was there. At first, being with this version of yourself feels almost uncomfortable. You've grown used to the armor, to the measured way you speak, to the careful steps you take to avoid shaking someone else's comfort. This other you, your original you, is bolder. They laugh too loud. They speak dreams into the air without asking if it's the right time. They don't look over their shoulder to see if anyone is watching. Being in their presence reminds you of what you've lost, but also of what you're capable of reclaiming. And here's the thing, they are not here to judge the years you've spent without them. They are not angry that you shut them away. They understand why you did it. They know you were surviving, and sometimes survival means dimming the light, so you can navigate the shadows without blinding yourself. But they are here now to say that surviving is not enough anymore. You are ready to live again. It's in small ways that you start to merge. You wear the clothes you love instead of the ones that are appropriate. You speak what you mean instead of what will be received easily. You dance in the kitchen without wondering if you look ridiculous. You start painting or singing or writing again, not because you're good at it, but because it feels like breathing. These aren't just hobbies. They're doorways back into the essence you thought you'd lost. The deeper you welcome this self, the more you notice the lies you've been living by. Lies like, it's too late to start over. I've changed too much to go back. That part of me doesn't fit into my life anymore. None of these are true. The you that stands before you isn't asking you to rewind time. They're asking you to integrate. To be both the one who knows how to survive and the one who knows how to live with abandon. To be wise without being hardened, open without being reckless. And it's not without fear. You worry that if you let this self fully out into the world again, they'll get hurt like before. That people will misunderstand them, try to control them, or turn away when they shine too brightly. And maybe some will. But here's the difference. You are not the same as you were when you last lived from this place. You have boundaries now. You have discernment. You have the ability to walk away without collapsing. You can protect this part of you without burying them. This reunion isn't just emotional. It's spiritual. You feel your energy shift, your creativity flow again, your capacity for joy expand. Even your body responds. You breathe deeper, sleep better, and move with more ease. Because your soul recognizes the truth. You were never meant to live cut off from your own essence. The midnight visitor's gift is now clear. They didn't just help you clear what wasn't yours. They cleared the path for you to reclaim what was always yours. And in that reclamation, you realize something profound. This is the version of you who can meet life without fear of losing herself again. This is the version who will carry you forward. Not because she's stronger, but because she's whole. And when you see her standing there, smiling at you with the same spark you used to see in the mirror as a child, you know you will never send her away again. Gate 4, where darkness lived, now light remains. Sagittarius, for so long, the darker corners of your soul felt like places to avoid. You knew where they were, the rooms where painful memories lived, the drawers that held the letters you never sent, the shadows that crept in when you were alone too long. You had learned to navigate your life like someone living in a half-lit house, keeping to the bright spaces and pretending the rest didn't exist. But healing, real healing, isn't about building more light to chase the dark away. It's about walking into the dark with your own lantern, willing to see what lives there without turning away. This time you didn't fight the darkness with force. You didn't draw swords or armor yourself against it. You did something much braver. You stopped running. You turned toward the locked room in your soul and simply opened the door. And when you stepped inside, you realized that what you feared most wasn't a monster waiting to devour you, but the echoes of your own voice, calling from the past, asking to be heard. The grief, the disappointment, the heartbreak, they were still there, but they weren't trying to harm you. They were waiting for you to acknowledge them, to say, I see you. I know you're part of my story, but you're not the whole story. The moment you allowed yourself to sit in that room without flinching, something shifted. The darkness softened. It wasn't erased, it transformed. Like the night sky, it became a backdrop for your light to shine brighter. The memories remained, but they no longer defined you. The pain was still in the timeline of your life, but it no longer dictated your choices. You stopped being afraid of remembering because you realized remembering doesn't mean reliving. What once felt like a weight became a foundation. You began to understand that the most beautiful parts of you, your compassion, your empathy, your ability to see others beyond their masks, were born from these dark rooms. You wouldn't be who you are without them. And instead of wishing them away, you began to integrate them into your sanctuary. They became quiet corners where you could rest, places where your inner wisdom resided. And here's the miracle. When you made peace with those spaces, they started to glow. Not with the harsh glare of trying to fix everything, but with the gentle, steady light of acceptance. It was the kind of light that didn't need to be announced, the kind that warms everything it touches without asking for thanks. People around you notice the change, though they might not be able to name it. You move differently now, calmer, more grounded, as if you know exactly who you are and what you carry. You no longer over-explain your boundaries. You no longer hide your joy to make others comfortable. You can sit in silence without the need to fill it, because you're no longer afraid of what silence might bring. The most profound part is that you no longer feel alone, even when you are physically by yourself. The midnight visitor, the reclaimed parts of yourself, the shadows you've befriended, they are all part of your inner home now. You have become your own sanctuary, a place where every version of you belongs, where the light and the dark coexist without war. And when you stand in this new space within yourself, you realize something. The light was never meant to banish the dark. It was meant to live alongside it, to create depth, meaning, and beauty that can't exist without both. Now, when you think back to the fear you once had of your own inner landscape, you smile, because you know there is nothing in you that needs to be hidden anymore. You are whole. You are free. And even in stillness, you are radiant. Conclusion: the sacred ending is just the beginning. Sagittarius, what happened to you wasn't just a midnight mystery or a fleeting spiritual moment. It was the turning of a key that had been rusting in the lock for far too long. You didn't just have a visitor that night. You had a reunion with the truest parts of yourself, a cleansing of what was never yours to carry, a reintroduction to the fire you thought had gone out. This wasn't about being saved. It was about remembering that your soul was never lost, only layered under years of survival, compromise, and the noise of other people's stories. Now the sacred door inside you has swung wide open, and it will never close the same way again. You have seen what lives on the other side, your own wholeness, and there is no forgetting that sight. You are no longer chasing peace and other people's approval. You are no longer measuring your worth by the comfort you give to others. You are living in a way that feels like breathing, like your heartbeat is finally in rhythm with the life you were meant to live. This is not the end of your story. It is the place where the real story begins. Because now, every choice you make will come from alignment, not fear. Every step you take will be in conversation with your intuition. Every person you allow into your sacred space will meet the version of you who knows she is whole, who no longer performs peace but truly lives it. You don't need to announce this transformation. You don't need to convince anyone that you've changed. The world will feel it in the way you move, the way you speak, the way you simply exist. And those who are meant for you will recognize you immediately, not because you are the same as you were, but because you have become the truest version of yourself. So walk forward without apology. Live like someone who knows the light inside her can't be dimmed. And remember, the midnight visitor didn't come to take something from you. They came to return you to yourself. And now that you have found her, you will never let her go again.